Today, we are diving deep into a really fascinating and, I think, critical reevaluation of classic Jungian psychology. We're going to look at how these foundational ideas are being challenged and, frankly, transformed by our modern understanding of gender and sexuality. And I want to start with this quote because it just cuts right to the heart of the matter. This comes from a trans-identified patient, and it really grounds this whole conversation in a real-world problem. It shows us that when these psychological models are treated like rigid, unchangeable rules, they can actually cause genuine harm. And that really sets the stage for the core conflict here, right? This tension between an established psychological orthodoxy and the actual lived experiences of LGBTQ+ people. So it's so important to remember this isn't just some abstract academic debate, not at all. When the very maps we use to understand the human psyche are outdated, it has profound consequences. It creates these huge blind spots in therapy that can leave people feeling completely misunderstood and invalidated, often at a time when they need support the most. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of why this clash even exists, we need to go back and unpack the original Jungian blueprint. And as we're about to see, it's built on a few core concepts that are, well, deeply binary. So this table really lays out that traditional framework. At the absolute heart of Jung's model, you have the anima, this idea of the inner feminine soul figure in a man, and the animus, the inner masculine spirit in a woman. Now, these ideas were revolutionary for their time, but they were fundamentally rooted in a biological, binary, and, importantly, a contrasexual model. The logic was, a man has a male body, so his inner other must be female, and of course, vice versa. You can probably see how this blueprint starts to get pretty problematic when we're talking about identities that just don't fit into that neat little box. For a little more context, let's zoom out for a second. The philosopher Michel Foucault gave us this really useful concept, Scientia Sexualis. What he was arguing is that our modern idea of a fixed sexual identity isn't some timeless truth. It's actually a pretty recent invention. It's this historical shift where what you do sexually and who you desire became the very core of who you are as a person. And this is a perfect illustration of Foucault's point. Before the 19th century, sure, certain sexual acts might have been seen as forbidden, but they didn't define your entire being. Then, psychiatry came along and started to classify people. It literally invented the homosexual as a species, a specific kind of person. Sexuality was no longer just about what you did. It became about who you were. And in a wild historical twist, this very act of labeling inadvertently created the foundation for new political identities to rise up. So, given all that history, how is Jungian thought evolving? This is where we get into the really exciting part. We're going to look at the thinkers and ideas that are updating these foundational concepts for today. And what better way to frame this evolution than with Jung's own words? He saw himself as a heretic, right? Someone willing to question the orthodoxy of his day. So you could say the thinkers who are updating his work aren't rejecting him. They're actually carrying on his own heretical spirit of pushing boundaries and challenging dogma. Now, one of the most powerful new tools for this evolution is a concept from the analyst Gustavo Pessoa, the Heteropatriarchal Complex. This is huge. It reframes heterosexuality as not just a personal desire, but as a whole cultural system, like an operating system running in the background, with unspoken rules and power dynamics that shape how all of us think about gender. So let's break down how this complex works in what a Jungian would call the collective shadow. First, it sets the white heterosexual male as the default, the universal norm for humanity. Then, it insists on this rigid binary that's almost exclusively tied to reproduction. And the result? It creates a power system that automatically subordinates and dismisses anyone who doesn't fit into that narrow mold. By calling it a complex, we can start to see it for what it is, a cultural force, not some eternal truth. So this is all fascinating theory, but what does this heretical evolution actually look like in practice? Well, these new frameworks are offering entirely new maps for navigating the soul. I love this literary example. In this Tennessee Williams story, the hero isn't the guy you'd expect. He's the quote-unquote deviant, a homosexual vampire who basically represents the Jungian shadow. And it is precisely through his otherness that he becomes the savior, the only one who can actually fight back against a repressive society. It just brilliantly shows how embracing the shadow and flipping the script can be an incredible act of psychological resistance. And speaking of new maps, here's a mythic one for healing, drawn from the Hindu myth of Shiva and Sati. We can see it as a four-part journey. It all starts with Sati, who represents the persona. This is that innocent, emerging part of the self, that budding queer desire that first gets shamed by the outside world and learns that to survive, it has to hide. So, what comes next? Daksha, the dogmatic priest who perfectly embodies the shadow. This is that inner critic, right? The voice inside our own heads that has absorbed all of society's prejudice. It's the part that judges our authentic self, calling it disgusting and demanding we conform to the norm. But out of all that pain and rejection, a new figure emerges, Virabhadra, the warrior, who represents the Animus. This is that fierce, reactive rage that's born from trauma. Now, if it's left unchecked, that anger can be really self-destructive. But if it's integrated, it transforms into the strength to finally set boundaries and protect the true self. And finally, we reach Shiva, representing the self, total wholeness. This is that authentic spiritual connection that goes beyond all labels. It's only achieved after a period of profound despair, which is symbolized by Shiva wandering with Sati's dead body. It's a journey through darkness that leads to a rebirth. This figure embodies both the divine masculine and the divine feminine, representing true, beautiful integration. Okay, so let's bring this back into the therapy room, because this evolution has led to a major crossroads, especially when it comes to treating gender dysphoria. And this slide lays out the two main approaches. On one side, you have the gender affirmative model, which really prioritizes an individual's own felt identity as the guiding truth. On the other side, you have exploratory therapy, which tends to view gender dysphoria as a possible symbol for other underlying forms of distress. As you can see, both approaches come with what are perceived as serious risks, and the debate really highlights the incredibly high stakes for both patients and therapists trying to navigate this landscape. So, where does all of this lead? Well, it's leading toward a pretty fundamental shift in the field, a movement towards something that some are calling a queer heart of individuation. And we really have to credit the post-Jungian thinkers who helped pave this path. You have James Hillman, who reframed the anima not as some literal inner woman, but as the very process of soul-making. And June Singer, who championed the androgen as a symbol for psychological wholeness. The key takeaway here is that they decouple these powerful archetypes from biology. They turn them into more fluid, metaphorical, psychological functions that are available to absolutely everyone, no matter their gender. And really, at the end of the day, this is the ultimate vision. The goal of this entire heretical evolution is to modernize the field so it can actually serve everyone better. It's about creating a practice of psychology that is truly liberatory, one that recognizes queer journeys not as a problem to be fixed, but as vital, deeply meaningful paths to understanding the human soul. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. If the old maps we've been using to navigate our inner worlds are being completely redrawn, made more expansive, more inclusive, then what new territories, what undiscovered parts of ourselves are we now finally free to discover?